good morning, and welcome to this edition of I'm Not Crazy, But. Family, we have a special treat for you today. We are talking about what you are talking about in the 21st century parenting, old school versus new school, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm Dr. Rhonda Mattox, triple fellowship trained, board certified psychiatrist, and I have for you a treat today. We have with us a dynamic all-star cast, but as I begin to introduce them, do what you always do. Rep your city. Tell us where you are tuning in from. And if you would, do a little something extra. Tell us what it is that you think about when you hear the term old school parenting versus new school parenting. Go ahead and tell us that because we're going to make reference to some of the comments that you're making as we're talking. Today, we have with us none other than the Marlene Battle, who is a parent of six. Yes, she has a PhD in parenting. She has a little old school parenting and a little new school parenting rep. She has children from 6 to 21 years old. Now, she is not a mental health professional. She is a pharmacist, but I think anybody with 6 kids can come on here and teach us a thing or two about parenting. Next, we have with us Christina Hobson Allen, who is a licensed professional counselor and a mother of two. She is almost out of the game. Her children range from 18 to 21. Yes, you are who I aspire to be one day. Yes, yes, yes. And then we have our friend of the show, frequent flyer, Dr. Christy Jackson, who is a mother of three and a psychiatrist. And we have a man who needs absolutely no introduction in the Ellis Dean, former in an old life, a former adolescent counselor. So thank you, family, for joining us and
I
representing.
got two. I got two.
You got two. Oh, okay. He has two. Yes. Yes. So Ellis has two children. I am a mother of a teenager. Can I just ask for your prayers right now? Just keep me lifted. Keep me lifted. Keep me lifted. I need your prayers right now, saints of the Most High. Family, yes, thank you, Ty Austin, and thank you for the rest of you. Go ahead and, like I said, begin to rep your city and talk to us about what you think about with old school parenting versus new school. I will jump right in and just get us on the same page. I'm going to ask each of you what your thoughts are when you hear the term old school parenting versus new school parenting. What's the definition? And you can't find it in Webster, but what's your definition of old school parenting versus new school? And I'll start with the psychiatrist in the room, Dr. Jackson,
The other psychiatrist.
the other psychiatrist in the room,
I
Jack.
think it really depends on who you ask. There's this mindset that old school parenting is from a previous generation and that old school parenting was more stringent and more strict. But in all honesty, I remember when I was younger, I had friends that I thought were being parented very differently than I was. So their parents were old too. Some of their parents were older than mine. So I don't necessarily know if it's about the generation as much as it's about a parenting style. Like, so for instance, I remember having friends who got money to do chores. And in my house, it was just kind of like, this is just something that you do because you live here. We're not paying you to do chores, nor are we paying you to get A's. So I really think it just is a style of parenting as opposed to about an era or when somebody was raised. But it's my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Good point. Interesting point. Ellis, what about you?
I agree, and I think there's some. I definitely agree with that. It's a style versus an age. I also think that it's kind of more, if I want to say, hands off. Uh, Old school tends to be a little bit more hands off, kind of figure it out on your own kind of situation. This era, that latchkey kids are kind of old school parenting. Um, open up the door, let the kids run outside, and then as long as you're home by a certain time, I don't care what you did, as long as you're home alive and nobody died. That's kind of old school mentality thinking. Less helicopter parenting on old
Mhm.
school. They tend to listen more to the teachers and to the adults around versus your story. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that versus the new school parents, they take whatever the child say and they want to cuss out lottie dottie and everybody behind what that child said.
Right.
You know, versus listening to the adults. So that's a difference that I see in old school versus new school. Um, Old school, it lives by this, spare the rod, spoil the child a little bit too. So there's a little bit of that in there. Uh,
Absolutely.
as well. And now I've heard, I know about helicopter parents, but I've been hearing about bulldozing parents as well,
Mm.
where they just move all the obstacles out the way. The child don't have to experience any kind of adversity, any kind of disappointment. They want to take all that out the way. The
Mm.
child, gets to college and they start talking to the professors about why I didn't get an A. Well, you ain't do the work. That's why you didn't get no A. And so calling your mama when you about to do a job interview. These are real stories that I've heard.
Mm.
When they're about to graduate from college, and the mama going on the interview with them. And you're like, you're 22 years old. What you got your mama here for? I'm
Mm.
digressing, but yes, old school is more hands off. New school tends to be helicopter and bulldoze, and
Mm.
and want to listen to everything the child has to say.
Absolutely. And I've not heard the term bulldoze parenting before. So we're going to have to circle back to that. But I like what you said, because when I think about my childhood, it was go outside and play. And outside and play, I mean, and be back before the street lights come on. And
Mhm.
all of my aunts had permission to spank my bottom,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
not and I mean, and there wasn't a blink, a second look or whatever, and I was probably gonna get a spanking when I got home as well.
Oh yeah, you got two. Everybody had beating rights.
Right,
Okay,
you know,
everybody in your circle had beating rights, and if you
yeah.
got one from somebody that wasn't in your house, you got two. You count that
Oh
as
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, um, um, Christina.
I think when I hear old school parenting, I think of discipline
Mm.
because I feel like they would listen to whoever said you were acting out or cutting up, and they would get your parents were going to get you. I remember being seen but not heard.
yeah,
Mm,
You
yeah.
can be
mhm,
seen but not heard. Keep your mouth shut. This is grown folks conversation.
Yeah.
Those type things. Where new school, it's kind of, well, what do you think? Well, share your thoughts, or how do you feel? Where old school, they didn't care how you felt. Do what I say. And then it was to do as I say, not as I do
Mm.
right.
mentality. So when I hear old school, new school, I'm thinking along the lines of the discipline dynamic. Like you said, spare the rod, spoil the child. That's old school for sure.
Mhm.
Because new school, it's like ask them how they feel, consider their emotions, all those things. Let's talk about it. There wasn't no talking in old
Mhm.
school. There was no talking. You just get beat down, and then they would say, this hurts me worse than it hurts you. Like,
I did that too. I didn't believe that.
Lies, the lies,
the
the
lies. So
lies.
yeah, that's what I think about.
Yes, and Dr. Battle, you're up.
So when it comes to old school, I'm in line with everyone else and what their thoughts were on it. I think of the word just dictatorship.
Mm.
Because again, it's whatever they said, it went. It was no questions asked. They were strict. It was cutthroat. Uh, New school, we're more a little bit relaxed. Like you said, Christina, we're more concerned about how they feel about things. What are your thoughts, your feelings towards it? But what I love about old school too was they had nonverbal communication.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mama, daddy, they could look at you, put that
And
eye
you
on
knew.
you, and you knew to get somewhere and sit down. They didn't even have to speak words. Or either they'll do it through clenched teeth. If you get ready to go in the
Mhm.
store, they'll give you a pep talk before you got out the car.
Don't
You
get up there
better
and act a
not go
fool.
in there and touch nothing. And they'll tell you, matter of fact, don't even look at it too hard. So that's what I think
Wait,
about
wait,
old
Dr.
school.
Marlene, you got to get out the car.
Yeah.
How
I was
many? How many?
privileged enough to
First
get out
off,
the
how many else
car.
got left in the car? How many else got left in the hot car when your mama
Me
was
and my
shopping?
brother were in the
Okay,
car in the parking lot of
you
Cub
got out
Foods
the car.
many a
You
Probably
time.
because I was the only girl, so that's probably why I could get out the car.
Now, I could get out the car, but let me tell you the talk that I got. Don't touch nothing.
Yep.
Mhm.
You ain't getting nothing. Don't ask for nothing. That was the
Right,
question that I got. So
right.
that's old school parenting. And I will tell you that growing up, I said, I'm never going to be anything like you. I'm not going to be anything like you when I grow up.
You
And
told the lady that?
no, 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 no,
Oh.
That's what she
no,
told
no.
herself when
I'm
she was
still
in
here,
bed with
aren't I? I'm still alive, aren't I? No, I didn't tell her that.
Oh, in your diary you said that. I got
In
you.
my mind, I said that. But here's the thing, though, and the rest of the story was, there was no talking back, but it wasn't just talking back. Like you didn't get to make eye contact and look too stern. Like if you made eye contact, it's like you talking back. I didn't say nothing, right? So old school parenting, it served the purpose of discipline, respect, at least respect in your face, that kind of thing. What do you think about when you hear new school parenting? And I'll start off a little bit because now the way we've been talking, it almost sounds like that that we may ridicule new parenting a little bit. Or we don't. We don't want our audience to think that. But when I hear new school parenting, I do think more dialogue. And I like that because my mom would say, "Are you talking back?" And I'm just like, uh, are we having a conversation? Like, aren't I am I supposed to have, you don't get to, but I think of new school is more feelings based, talking, you know, and some other things. But let me just let you all chime in. Um, Christina, what do you think about when you hear new school parenting?
I think it just depends on the family, the parent themselves, because there's different styles to parenting, and I think understanding those styles is important because, like we were saying, we had more of the authoritative parents, they were more, well, authoritarian, like a dictatorship. That's, you do what I say. Whereas new school, what do you think?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And I think allowing that is teaching the child to be more confident and and be well spoken and things of that nature. I think asking those questions helps the child to think through things versus you just telling them this is how it's going to be. So I think new school, I think for one, you have to be more patient.
Yeah.
And I don't think our parents were as patient maybe with us because they had so much other stuff going on that we were just, like I said, you were seen but not heard. The parents now are trying to have that dialogue. And I think dialogue is very important when raising your kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I hear you, Ursuline. All I know is that old school kept us out of trouble. There is no fear of parents today. Maybe that's why so many parents, have been killed by their children. Old school can be worked with new school.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Let's see. There's it. You all drop the rest of it. Drop some remarks as well. Sean Lumpkin, I see you. Slavery fear wasn't right. I see that. I think Sean Lumpkin also maybe thinks along the lines of friends with their kids. I think he was, or Sean was answering that in relation to what is new school. What's new school parenting? New school parenting is sometimes too lenient. Certainly. All right. Anyone else want to add to what she said?
I would just say when I think about new school, I think about we use more of a sort of a time out method. And what I mean by that is we're not as hands on as far as discipline wise. And with that time out method, it comes, okay, we'll take their cell phone from them for a little bit, or we take a tablet, something that they really value or think of as importance to them as a discipline method. And that's something I find myself using on my children more is the takeaway method or the time out method. You just need to get away from this for a little bit. So that's what I think about new school and how more lax we are, discipline wise.
I think too, there's consequences. We as new school parents, we say these are the consequences of your decisions. Whereas old school, you knew you were gonna get a spanking. That's what was gonna happen. New school, okay, there's consequences and there's choices. You can do this or you can do this. Both of them have consequences. You choose, and I think that's very different because there was no choice. It was just, this is what the outcome is going to be. Whereas new school, these are your options, and I think that's very different as well.
So aren't the options a privilege though? Don't y'all think? Sometimes when I think about new school, even in my own life, I can't judge nobody else's life. I know that parenting humbled me, and I came to parenting later in life than my parents did. So when I became a parent, I was in my 30s already. My parents became parents. They were very early 20s. And so when I think back about some of the things that used to make me scream into my pillow, right? Because you couldn't really do it out loud.
Right.
Things I just thought were crazy and unfair. I realized that My parents had a fraction, the two of them together, a fraction of the income that I make today.
Mhm.
They did not have as many options. Little stuff that we take for granted now, like Google, a smartphone,
Right.
YouTube,
Mhm.
literally was not a thing. It was a lot of that wasn't a thing when we were all in college. Forget about when we were kids. It wasn't even a thing when we were in undergrad.
Mhm.
So
Right.
looking at what my parents had to work with, I know that I sit kind of from a different seat criticizing some of their parenting decisions with what they had going on back then. Yes, it
Mhm.
was authoritarian, but at the same time, okay, you could do what I say or not, you might actually get killed. So this is not about me whooping you. This is me trying to tell you something so that you can respect me and that could ultimately save your life. So I think that sometimes we have to reflect on what the old school parents had to work with. It's not that they weren't intelligent and they weren't hardworking, they were. But I just feel like they grew up in a different world. So, like, if my daughter rolls her eyes at me because she doesn't like the hairstyle that I paid for, I'm quick to tell her I didn't ever get my hair done regularly as a
Right.
child. It's not because my mother didn't love me. My parents both worked full time. They always had good jobs, but that was just not a part of our lifestyle.
Mhm.
Um, and she's like, huh? Like it's like I'm speaking German to her, but she really doesn't get it. So sometimes I think that a lot of new school parenting, with the exception of the bulldozer thing, that's new to me too. I didn't know it was a thing.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
we parent sometimes from a position of privilege, and it kind of makes it easy to cackle or to be judgmental or be traumatized from the generation before. But we just have to keep in mind that they were kind of doing the best they could with what they had, and we just had.
I think when I hear new school, I think the word partnership. I think new school
Mm,
parenting as more of a partnership than them being in more of an authoritative role. I also, patience. I think Christina mentioned that. That was a word that came to my mind. I do think that I try to give my parents, and their constituents grace
Mhm.
because they grew up during segregation,
hmm,
and so they had to be harsher because they had to be in a stronger line because there could be literally death if you stepped out of line
Right.
Mhm.
uh, too far, right? And so there was really nothing. They had a really lack of control in their lives, and so when they bring that home and they have over control, right? So it's a reaction to, hey, I'm trying to keep you safe situation. What I do appreciate about the new school is um, they do talk and they kind of give their children understanding of what's happening, what the thought patterns are. The only thing if there was one complaint that I have, probably several, but one I would say initially is I think that you have to make sure that when you're explaining to a child that they're developmentally ready for that explanation.
mm,
You're talking to a
mhm,
5-year-old. 5-year-old can't comprehend some of your thought patterns, right? So you got to graduate that as their development is able to be able to grasp what you're saying, especially abstract thinking when that's around what 12, 13, 12 to 15 when they start developing abstract thought. Then you can start talking, giving them more explanations. But if I'm explaining to a 5-year-old, they are operating on basically id impulses for the
Mhm.
side. Y'all know what I'm talking about. For people that are watching, it is like you just what you want. Okay,
mhm,
driven by your desires. I'm hungry. I'm gonna act a fool until I get some food. Those
Mhm.
are things. So you can't sit there and explain to a child that this is not the time and the place to get something to eat, and we're gonna get something later on. They're not trying to hear that. So really, when you're having that parent partnership, you got to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate for the child.
I like. So partnership versus dictatorship. When I think about new school parenting, I definitely think about more communication. Um, I think about just more involvement because, like I said, we would be told, go outside and play. And and you use the water hose to get water. You wouldn't come back into and out the house to get no water. You letting this air out. Don't do that. So whereas now, we're thinking in advance, oh, what are we going to put you in for the summer? Whereas, what camps are you going to? And, we need to have you in music classes. And so there's like all of this extracurricular activity to where, many times the children are exhausted. Um,
mm,
and I see value in keeping children busy because, an idle mind is a devil's workshop is what we learned. But sometimes it's the overkill because we're living our lives through our children.
Mm.
and they are not appreciating it
Mm.
at all. And so what
Creativity is developed when a child has, so yeah, we understand the idle minds, we get that phrasing, but also you have to realize research shows that creativity comes when you do have time to sit and think, right, and don't have so much to do, like,
Mhm.
so you want your child to be creative, and you also want them to be critical thinking. If you don't give them the opportunity to do that, just give them a piece of construction paper and a box of crayons and let them go. That's an activity. We don't have to fill them with all of this stuff that we're paying for and driving ourselves crazy, running from work because you're going to pay that extra fee if you pick them up late from their camp, that you pay for, but you get charged extra because you there 5 minutes late. Y'all know what I'm talking about, parents. Just say out if you don't know what I'm saying. So I'm just saying that we have to find that space of mixing in some of the old school, because everything the old school folks did wasn't bad. Like
Right.
Yes,
I
true.
understand having hard guardrails can be good, because they can choose to step over that line. But if they know, like one of the comments said, if you had stepped that line, something was coming, you ain't want that. But if I know all I'm going to do is get a stern talking to, well, I can do it.
A stern talking to, I would appreciate a stern talking to.
It's not as punitive.
Yeah.
It's like if you have some pain associated with the consequence, you might rethink that behavior versus if I'm just going to be standing in the corner with my face on the corner for 5-10 minutes. Yeah, I might go on and do that because it's not punitive enough. So we got to find that space to where we can have some old school mixed in with new school.
And it's so dependent on the child as well.
Right.
My brother, he followed instructions the first time. He didn't ask questions. He was like, he was my mother's ideal child. And I frequently say when I'm introducing him, meet my mother's favorite child. I was, why, but why, but why, but why, and I mean, and I was on her nerves so much with my but whys. And now, of course, I get paid to ask, but why? So parents who are listening, do not stomp that annoying trait out of your kids. It may be their moneymaker one day, you know. Now we want to go to definitely want to tune in to our viewers. Ellis, do we have any new comments that we want to acknowledge? And as we're doing that, I'll let you all know. See, I'm old school and it came from my upbringing. It kept me in check because I knew what was coming. We didn't have any electronics to be taken away, only no TV or no going out with friends. Every day I see videos on SM, how on social media, how kids give teachers hell, no respect at all. It's very sad, but it starts at home. It's interesting, Carolyn, that you say that because one of the things that I remember, and it goes back to what Dr. Jackson said, is I remember my very first B. I remember bringing my report card home and I had all A's and one B. And my mother jumped right to the B. And I remember getting a whooping for making it. Mrs. Crane in the second grade. Okay, I don't know what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I remember that B and who gave it to me. Now, fast forward, my daughter comes home and she is sobbing because not because she got a B. And because I had just written about that experience and was reflecting on it, my strategy was more empathetic towards her, because she was doing to herself more than I could have done to her with the way she was managing and ingesting, how the getting a B. And I don't know why she was crying so hard, but it was really devastating to her because she had that B. But because of my experience, I dealt with her more. My mother never apologized to me that I could ever remember in my whole life. My apology was a meatloaf or some pork chops and a potato pie, my favorite foods at that time. Her saying, I'm sorry, that never, ever happened. I don't even know that she could utter those words. I don't know if that was a part of her
She
language.
did. It was wipe your face and come on, get something to eat. That's, I'm sorry. Old school
That's
parent.
right. And so there's some things that we take away that were good from that, and there's some things that we wanted to pivot from. What were some of the good old school parenting strategies that you took away and that you apply, and then how have you incorporated some of the new strategies, the gentle parenting, so to speak, and we'll come back to defining exactly what gentle parenting is considered. But you grinning, so I got to start with you. You look like you want to say something.
I I will say, like I said earlier, I think that the hard consequences
Yeah.
and knowing what the consequences were going to be, old school, I think that was good. I do think that you do, because I say so is a fine answer. A child is not always owed an explanation, and sometimes that helps them understand that you can't question every single thing.
Yes.
Uh, so because I said so is, and you got to let that breathe. Parents, because you feel like you owe your
Let it
child, you don't owe them anything. You owe them as much as you give them, right? And so, and I'm talking to parents that are not neglectful, that are not abusive. So I'm speaking in that space where you're trying as a good parent. You're not doing those things that are in the extreme realms. But in that space where you're trying to be a good parent, you don't owe them explanation. That's an option. I think that's somebody said that earlier. That's an option. Texas said. So those things were good. Giving hard and fast, letting your child explore. Because I had so much fun by just getting let out the house and going to go meet my friends, and we rode bikes all day long, and we created games, and we had fun, and you tested limits, and sometimes you got in trouble, you had to get snatched back, but you knew how to explore and be okay just being with you. What I see today is that, even with my own children, they have a hard time just sitting for a long period of time. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I had to sit on that porch with my grandmother sometime for hours. Okay.
Back of the bank, wasting time.
all that for a Bronx butterscotch. Okay. So some of that old school of just being able to, let your child be a child. Because right now, you're right. These devices, they're connected to so many things. They're getting bombarded with adult situations and way before they're ready for it. But as a kid, with no internet, we had that set of encyclopedias in the house, and what you knew was
Ellis grew up rich. She had the whole.
we had the whole set. Oh yeah, we had the whole set. Look, like we was good. But now seriously, just going out and being able to explore and being a child, those are the things that are really good about old school.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about not having all those devices, I remember I was a reader. I was an avid reader. Now my mom would buy these books from the garage sales, and she didn't know what she was buying me. She was buying me Harlequin romances and family. That was like mini porn to a right? But all she cared about was that I was reading, but she was hooking a sister up, okay? She wasn't pre-reading the books. But I think that may be why, because we have them involved in all these extracurricular activities, that they may not be reading as nearly as frequently because of what it is that we're doing, and we don't realize sometimes of the consequences of not balancing that well. So
Yeah.
the rest of you, I think I saw Dr. Battle looking like she was smiling real big with Ellie. I'll jump in for you. Tell us the strategies you like, and some you borrow from old school, and some you borrow from new school.
Okay. So I grew up in a two-parent home, and I believe that, sometimes we are a product of our environment. So I came from a two-parent home, displayed a lot of love. Like I was shown a lot of attention. I was the only girl in the baby at that. I have two older brothers. So I was extremely spoiled, and just whatever I wanted, I could have. But I sort of take the love concept and apply it to my children, just making sure to make time to listen to them, making sure that they know I love them. I tell them I love them every morning when I drop them off at the bus or at school. And just a lot of love and hands-on and being present. I love that how I grew up and being, old school strategy and methods. And I will say, I love about the old school of that it really does take a village to raise a child. And that's something that I try to incorporate, the same method with my kids. For example, my 13-year-old, y'all have 6 kids and they all have multiple and split personalities. So it's challenging more some than others than, dealing with them or whatever. But my 13-year-old had a situation where she didn't want to get up and do something at church. She can sing, but she's on the dance team and everything else at school, and let the music drop a beat, and she can pop it, lock it, rock it, and everything else, drop it too. But she want to get up at church and sing, and so she had an attitude about it, and so we had to deal with that. So it took my mother-in-law, her grandmother, talking to her, and one of the church members called her out to talk to her, and then some other relatives talked to her, and that made her upset. Well, why does everybody have to talk to me or whatever? And I was like, honey, it takes a village to raise a child. So I like that aspect of, old school. And I do like new school strategies is allows children to express themselves. Like it's been stated before, we really didn't have an opportunity to express, how we feel. And so I allow my children a quick opportunity to say, well, why did you do that? Or what was your thought process behind that before I apply my discipline methods?
And I like how you said a quick. We're not about to have a 3-hour discussion, but a quick. And that goes with Dr. Battle with what Shaya, I hope I'm saying your name right, with what Lopez said. Going to church and breaking bread together as a family is rare nowadays, which is old school to maintain a bond with your family. What I heard from you is extended family is everything. I grew up in a single parent home, but I didn't realize how rich I was because my grandparents lived, for a while, my grandparents lived right next door to me. I had 3 sets of aunts and uncles that lived behind me. My great grandparents lived just a little bit down the street. So when my mom said, go outside and play, like I had all eyes on deck paying attention to me, even though she wasn't looking at me. But the thing about it was that you were here, I grew up watching Young and the Restless and Bold and the Beautiful and whatever the old people were watching, I was in front of it. But I was hearing their lessons as well. When you get to stay with your grandparents and your aunts and uncles, they forget you in the room when you're an only child. When you were young like that, they'll forget you in the room. So I would hear all kinds of stuff I didn't have any business hearing. But I like that the extended family, and I feel like some of us have missed that in the new school generation because we went to different cities and all that stuff and everything. Dr. Jackson and I don't remember who else hasn't weighed in. Whoever hadn't weighed in, jump in on that question if you'd like.
I think that one of the things I can say that I like borrowing from the old school, if you will, was like the mindset of having some kind of, number one, pride in your family. And then the concept of, I don't know what y'all could tell me what you would call it, but I remember, for instance, going, y'all got lectures going into the store. We would get lectures like if I was coming over your house, like don't go over there looking like you don't eat at home. Don't go over there acting like you don't have any sense. And back then I used to think they would just, like overkill. But in retrospect, sometimes in this day and age, kids just be a whole fool and have no insight. You can't even be mad at the child. The child don't even know how out of pocket they are. But when they come, around you and your children, you're looking at them like they didn't have to talk with you. Like you're just the queen of the ball or the king of the castle, wherever it is you show up on the planet. And we were just not raised that way. It's not that they didn't have compassion for us in the house, but to go outside and act like you hungry was a big thing. Not because my parents were mean, but because my mom literally cooked 7 days a week. She had a full-time job, and so did my dad. Both my parents cooked and cleaned. There was a lot of stuff my dad didn't do, but the general gender roles didn't really exist in my house. So for them, it was, especially being immigrants at the time, it's egregious for you to go over your friend's house and be complaining that you're hungry and you just left from home and went somewhere else. That was a big, faux pas. So that I appreciate. One of the things that I love about the privileged parenting is having the opportunity to give my children the chance to express their opinions. That backfired on me one time. I messed around and asked the children what they thought about me as a mother. My daughter wrote me a note. It's in my Bible. I had to pray after I read it. But I had to look up some scriptures to target because the points were clear. they were they were indisputable and they were in fact clear. It was facts. But I was proud of myself though, because I said I always want her to feel like she can respectfully share her opinion. Now, can she flare her nostrils and roll her eyes and say it to my face? Nope. But if she has courage enough to write it down and to give it to me as a note when requested, I think that's a life hack that I could say I draw from this era, because I could not imagine. First of all, my parents never asked the question, but even if they did, they could ask me today. I don't know if I would answer. Like, I don't know if I can really answer honestly. I'm low key like, wait, is my mom watching this? Because I didn't, it's different. I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the things I do like for new school is the new school parents. At least I try to be as reflective of how I am as a parent,
Yes.
and so and do like some self checkups to say, okay, am I? And I do that with my children. Say, how's this landing on you? Because and one of the things I wrote a piece about it. I wrote a blog about it. Really getting feedback from your children and accepting it, right? And just saying, okay.
Mhm.
I know as a child there was those things, and we all had those things we said underneath our breath. We screamed in the pillow that
no,
we
I
would
didn't
never do.
think my breath.
That we would never do when we become parents. And I started doing that, but I started parenting. But I was parenting for me. I was parenting trying to correct what I felt that were mistakes in my upbringing.
Mhm.
Mm,
And you have to parent your child for who they are, not
mm,
for who you want it to be.
Mhm.
And that can be a big difference in how you reach your child and the relationship you have with your child. It's because if we start trying to correct our own stuff, we're going to make some new stuff in our kids, and they're going to be missing some things in their life. And so parent for who they are as individuals and for what they need versus what you needed when you were a child.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Mhm.
You know, as I've navigated parenting, I have some highlights and some lowlights. And one of the things that I do frequently is I will share my lowlights because people assume if you are in ministry that you have all the answers. They assume if you are in mental health that you have all the answers.
mm.
They make some assumptions about you, and I just want to clear the air for anybody who's watching. There's nobody on this panel who is perfect, who
Yeah.
has nailed it every step of the way.
Mm.
There have been times when I have apologized to my daughter tearfully
Yeah.
because I really did not like how I communicated with her. Because we always make excuses about our kids if they've not eaten or if they've not slept. I used to think when people would say, "Oh, don't mind him, he hasn't eaten or he
I'm
hasn't
like,
slept."
they just bad.
You know what I'm saying? But when after you become a parent, you realize when children have not eaten or slept that
Mine bad too.
they go out. But here's the rest of the story. And if as parents, if we have not eaten
Yes.
and if we have not slept, we
Mhm.
can really, and so it was one of those things when I was hungry and tired, and I just did not like how it landed. But it wasn't immediate though, because in the immediate aftermath, I stood, I was like, yeah, but after I had a time to reflect, I was like, no,
Mhm.
and so, I approached her and I was like, can we have a do-over? You know, mommy is really sorry, da 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 da. I think it's really important for us to, and this is a part of the new, I don't know if it's general or not, but the new style of parenting is to be able to apologize to your children in real time and to admit that you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
And um and and for me, it is that my daughter has taught me is don't try to, because even though I like to think I'm old school, in some areas I'm new school too. And I wonder, I think if my mama saw me right now, she would just turn over in her grave based on how I just handled this. But
Mm.
it was a way that she needed because of this particular child. And so, tell us about some of the things that you are utilizing now that, I mean, I don't know if your parents are still alive, but your parents might give you the stank eye if they saw you doing it, and yet it's something you stand by because it's a good strategy for your children. Did that question make sense?
Hmm.
Do you mind if I go back a second? Because I didn't make a comment on the previous.
Certainly.
I just wanted to add with my mom, because she was a mixture of the old school, new school. She's right there on the cusp.
Hmm.
So the thing that I respect so much about that is because she had that open communication with me. I could go to her and tell her anything, and I received the same love, whether it was something good or bad. Just that love that and some kids grow up and they never hear I love you from the mom, but they know mom loves them. But I think it's so important for this generation that we say those things, that we express those things. So being loving toward the child, that was something. My mom was very loving, she was very affectionate, she was open with communication, and that's what I use now with my kids. Where my husband, he would be like this with the kids, and he is the disciplinarian. But for me, it's like just being that loving, supportive. I validate my kids, things of that nature. I think that is also important because our parents, they taught us in their way of teaching us. But this generation of kids right here, we have to teach them differently. And I
Hmm.
know where Ellis was saying, the developmental age of the child, I will say these kids are far more advanced than we were.
Mhm.
So the way we talk to them, I mean, I have a good friend of mine. She talks to her 2-year-old like he's an adult, and the thing about it, he understands.
Hmm.
And he when he talks back, I don't understand what he's saying, but Mama understands. I can talk to him as if he is an adult. He responds to me, even though he's a baby, and wah, wah. Like she'll be like, "Okay, we're not going to do that right now. You're going to end up taking a time out if you don't use your big boy words." And I'm thinking, I would have just, I don't know how I would have handled that with my child. She probably got popped. But it's like, use your words, teach your children. And that's
Yeah.
a little bit different, I think, than I got, even as a child, or my mother would have gotten as a child. It's like that, teach
Yes.
them the opposite of that wrong behavior.
Yeah.
Discipline doesn't have to be a pow pow pow, as my grandmother would say. It doesn't have to be physical, but it could be just that. Talk to your child, communicate with your child, teach the child, and that makes a big difference. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add
And
that
that's
because I
okay. And
thought that
that
was
goes in line.
important.
That goes in line with what some of the comments we've had. Tammy Polk says, yes, my daughter was shocked that I was more receptive to some things she needed to say than
Hmm.
she thought. We have a whole lot of truths and we got some smiley faces. Gigi says, allowing children to express themselves, but also guiding them when you see them, flaming in the wrong flaming in the wrong direction. A combo of new and old school. Yes, Gigi. Yes, absolutely. And Tammy Polk says she's a mix of old and new school. She has conversation with her kids. However, she knows how to revert back to the ancestors if need be. I revert back to the ancestors. I'm with you, Tam. Absolutely. So now I will say, does anybody remember my last question, Christina?
You
Those were
said
great
you said
points.
what were the things that Mama would give you the stank eye if she
Yes,
saw the way you were handling the situation today?
yes. Anybody want to wait? Yeah, I got a funny story for you with that. I was driving, so my daughter knows that I'm not supposed to raise her voice. At 3, she knew this, and I didn't realize she did. But I had raised my voice to her while we were driving, and this is what my daughter said. She said, "I am not your child. You will talk to me respectfully, or not at all." Now we driving, right? She's in her car seat, okay. And so I said her name. I am your mother. You are my daughter. And before I could get, where did you get that from? I saw these flashes of, and I think I probably only said that to her dad maybe 2 or 3 times at very well placed times. And this child was in the corner or somewhere in the house and heard that. And at 3 years old, she said, I am not your child. You will talk to me respectfully or not at all. And so for me, that was a parenting highlight. And I tell you all about my lowlights all the time, but the highlight was that I had modeled for this child that she should be talked to respectfully. And she got it at 3. I say that because family, some of the stuff that we're doing, even though they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, and we don't think they're picking up on it. That baby was 3 years old. I know because I was where she was going to daycare at the time, and she heard me, and and again, it couldn't have been more than 3 times, but she used the words and knew you don't talk to her any kind of way, and don't expect her voices. so be aware of when you are engaging with adults that we think in the church we'll hear things like train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old they shall not depart, and we think those are conversations that we're having with them. But
Yeah.
family and those who are listening, I need you to understand, you are training when they are witnessing your behavior. You are training when they're seeing your role model. Our parents used to say stuff like, do what I say, not what I do.
Right.
So we have so many kids who are smoking because they're getting it from their parents. So many kids who are doing some things because they're, and smokers, I'm not calling you out, but I'm just saying my mother told me she didn't want me to smoke, but she smoked. So guess who started smoking at 5? Almost burned the house down. But guess what? She had a strategy. Listen, y'all. Listen, she had a one-step strategy called a Black Hornet. She wore my butt out. Yeah, she was old school. I didn't smoke no more the rest of my life.
You
No
said the
more.
Black Hornet. The Black Hornet.
Babies went through one.
Say the name.
All right, so we'll answer that question and then be prepared because I'm going to have you to leave our audience with some lasting steps. Anyone want to weigh in on that last question I asked? What would your parents give you a stank eye for, but you stand by it? That's a really that.
I think I parent my children based off of their personalities. Now I do, because I have a different job that is more relaxed. When I was working, for instance, in an inpatient setting and working almost 80 hours a week, I done had bandwidth for that. But I kind of had to pick up on what gets who together. On its face, it looks unfair. So, for instance, my littlest one was cutting up at school, acting like he had no sense. After about 2 or 3 times of whooping you about it and you still doing it, I decided to take his sneakers away, which sounds dumb, right? But he's into his little expensive sneakers that his dad buys him. And so I went to Walmart and bought him some no name brand, no shoelaces. And
But
he felt like he broke down and cried. He cried
but
slave tears that he
that's
had
a
to wear to
scarlet
Walmart
letter.
shoes to
That's a
school.
scarlet letter right
Yeah,
there.
but at the end of the day, I was just like, I'm not gonna keep whooping you. I'm not doing it. So what we need to do to get this lady to stop calling my phone, because you're real smart, you know what to do. Now the other 2 kids are looking like, but you hit me. Like the lady had called you about me and you hit me, but I'm like, your brother not responsive to that. So I'm not going to keep doing something that doesn't work. Now, some new school people will say that that's shaming. I don't care. I got my first pair of Jordans when I was an adult and I owned a house at the time.
I ain't never had
So
no.
okay, so now for some reason you're 6 and you have several pair that I didn't buy. So what you're not going to do is be a little fashion icon at the school and act like a monkey at the same time.
Right.
So I decided to just kind of do that, whereas old school is just kind of like, this is the offense, this is the corrective action, kind of fair across the board. I think was it had its place, but the mindset. But I had to learn quickly. I'm basically a single parent, but I had to say to myself, well, it's just me and y'all outnumber me. So I got to figure out how to get you guys in line and still go to sleep so I can go to work and make our life work.
Oh, that's good, Dr. Jackson.
I bet he got some act. I bet he got some act right wearing bubbles.
He did. 2 days, and that was that. I still have them. I said, anytime you want to wear them again, let me know.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Nick, anybody else want to jump in?
I think the fact that I set limits, whereas when I was growing up, it was like, no, just no. And you're like, why? Because I said so. But I give limits and boundaries. Like this is the boundary, these are the consequences. So it's just kind of like you choose. When I give a choice, both of them are what I want. I don't give either this or that, and it's something that I don't want to see. I'm going to give 2 options. both of which are okay. You choose. And that's empowering that child. For one, I can make decisions, you know, I self-confidence. I'm confident that I can make good decisions, but I'm gonna make sure it's both two options that I want to give them. Whereas mama just been like, no, don't do it. You know, I'm going to take the time to actually talk about it, explain it. These are the consequences, and allow you to choose. But when I'm given those choices, I don't mind either of them, but you choose. And that's just empowering, I think, for the child.
I like it. Choices, being fair to the child, taking addressing them individually and not just kind of regulates by standard. Anything else? And you don't have to weigh in, but Dr. Battle or Ellis, anything else you want to add to that? All right. Okay. Well, yeah, I will say for me, it is that my mom would she would roll her eyes if she saw me doing all this talking that I do to with my daughter, and talking about sex and talking about drugs. I didn't have a sex talk. We've had a series of many talks, and we've talked about everything from in vitro fertilization to I can't say some of the stuff, that we talked about because to birth control to everything, and my child is 13, but she knew more than what I thought. And so I remember saying, I don't want you talking to your 12 and 13-year-old friends about sex because they know what you know. I want us
Right.
to talk about it. And
It's
so
gonna come
then
from me. Right.
right. And so then, she threw a whammy on me, and I had to make sure my face was straight because I wasn't expecting, I didn't know she knew some, or whatever. So I'm having to keep my face straight and everything. And I remember, something happened, and she came home, and at school, as soon as school was out, she told me, and it was a humdinger for me. And but I was like, man, she trusts me with this. Right.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I'm thinking, oh my God. Oh, I need some therapy right now. Who can I? But I do want to be, a safe place that they are comfortable talking to. But that safe place sometimes can, at times, get to a disrespectful place to where because you can talk, but it's like how you talk, like what your facial expressions look like, and all that stuff, that can sometimes take us there. So that fine balance of being a safe place and then also having that level of respect can be a delicate walk. As family, we are almost out of time. As we wrap up, what are give me a minute or two of what you wish you had said or what you want to leave with our audience who has been fantastic. And family, I have not said one time share, but what I will say is those of you who are watching, there's some cousins and aunties on your timeline that you've been wanting to tell them about their parenting strategies. Just use me. Share this video with them, and you don't have to say a word. You don't even have to point them out. Just go ahead and share so they can get it. But please share. And as we're wrapping up, I will start with, I'm not sure who has talked the shortest amount of time, but just jump in. Whoever wants to leave us with some words.
I think the most important thing, I'll start. The most important thing is to reinforce positive behavior.
Mhm.
I think if we focus on everything the child does wrong,
Mhm.
that is within itself breaking them down. I want to empower my child. I want my child to be able to make those decisions. I want them to feel confident. So I'm going to reinforce what they do right. Now, if they do something wrong, we're going to address it.
Mhm.
I'm not going to let that slide, but I want you to be self sufficient. I want you to be able to think and control your own emotions. I want that for you. So I'm going to reinforce the good behaviors. I'm going to teach you rather than tell you. I'm going to offer that support as far as the dialogue. We're going to be able to talk about it because I want you to come to me like you were saying, like your daughter came to you with some things and you were like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Mine did the same thing. We talked about sex in second grade. Now, some parents would not do that, but I felt like if she's asking the questions,
Yeah.
then I need to teach her the way I think she should be taught versus the TV and the social media and all of that. So I think it's important, know where your child's development is. Don't overlook and assume. Have those conversations if they ask the questions. And I think just reinforcing, I think that is key. And love, of course, discipline with love, not out of anger. Because sometimes our parents would get upset with us and be
Mhm.
reactive, but
Mhm.
not discipline out of a loving place, you
Mm.
know. So I
That's
think that's important as well.
that's good. Tell the truth in love. Teach them critical thinking, which is in line with what Leona Knight said. Anyone else want to jump in?
I'll just say real quick, I think it takes a combination of old school and new school parenting to raise kids these days. You know, you got to take it old school and be a little bit more strict at times, and then you got to do new school and be a little bit more gentler. And it really does take a village to raise these kids, whether it's parents, coaches, teachers, just whatever. It really takes all of us, or even just parents sharing tips with each other, like we're doing now, having conversations about it. It really does take a village. So those are my final thoughts.
Thank you. It takes a village. Anyone else want to hop in?
I would say number one, I do agree with the comment that was made earlier about not doing a baby talk. I didn't do it. I thought it was silly, and it does help your child develop vocabulary, and that, and then help your child pair feelings with words, right? And so therefore, because I think as Black parents in particular, we have a tendency to only let our children show two emotions, and that's anger and sadness, right? And even our boys, we don't even let them show sadness because boys don't cry, right? So there's all of these things that we teach our children that are unhealthy for their mental state. So we teach them how to pair words with their feelings. They can, when they get older, they can start expressing them more, and then they will have these outbursts or these kind of sudden mood changes because they can't say how they're feeling. But if you teach them, they can do that. The other thing I would say is set firm limits, and then after you set those firm limits, then you could follow up with having a conversation with them as to why, right? So you can give them the why. It's an option for you as a parent, but just get them to understand that when they're thinking about what they want to do one day as they get older, as they mature, what you're doing is modeling for them how they should go through their decision making, right? And so I've heard many times people are throughout this conversation, people talking about what they're doing is modeling to their children how they want to. Even when your child told you not to talk to her in a kind of way, my mom probably would have pulled the car over and we would have had some straightening right down the road. But just understanding that modeling behavior gave her, her self-esteem. The last thing I will say is, right, the overcorrection, and I was guilty of doing this. Oh, yeah, that was great, but you could have done this better. That was great, you could have done this better, and you're thinking you're helping them, but you're not. You're really eroding their self-esteem. You want them to have confidence that they can come into any situation and have some success, and that success is not being the best, being perfect, right? We don't want to teach them perfection. We want to teach them, hey, I am really good and I can continue to get better. And you do that by just encouraging more of the good and less of the, I'm going to tell you that was good, but it could have been this. Because all they hear is what came after the but. Because but stands for behold the underlying truth. And that is you could be better. And you can't do that, especially with a child that's developing. So those are my final thoughts.
Excellent points. Listen, I want to publicly thank Dr. Jackson, who came up with the concept that you wanted to talk about parenting. I think I just want to encourage and support the parents who are listening that we may not always get it right, but just grow and show yourself grace. Learn how to apologize to your kids. When you've done them wrong. But think on it. I like what I think Christina said when she talked about not discipline, not retaliating or disciplining in anger. Dr. Battle talking about the village. Family, we will not always get it right. We will make some missteps, but the important thing is to get back up. Acknowledge that you want to do it better, and then carry on. And I cannot end I'm Not Crazy But without saying when you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, certainly consider a licensed professional counselor, a mental health therapist, a psychiatrist, or what have you, so that you can have some place to just download and release and feel that you're not being judged. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Go ahead and share, because I am certain there is somebody on your timeline who needs to hear this. And again, these people on this panel are not perfect, but we are definitely prioritizing progress, and you should too. I'm Dr. Rhonda Mattox with I'm Not Crazy, but inviting you to tune in and set your clocks for every Thursday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you didn't get a chance to go and look at that mental health summit when we were talking about who do you run to just last Tuesday, you should definitely check that out. We were bringing it, family. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good one.